Wrench, are you telling me you can fix this with your hands? The words, sharp and laced with condescension, cut through the suffocating heat radiating off the tarmac at Forward Operating Base Talon. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Brennan stood with his arms crossed, staring not at the silent AH-64 Apache that had defeated his crew for 72 hours, but at the woman kneeling beneath it. Staff Sergeant Lyra Kane did not look up. Her hands, calloused and stained black with hydraulic fluid, moved across the aircraft's undercarriage with deliberate slowness. She was listening, not to Brennan's derision, not to the skeptical murmurs of young technicians, but to the silence of a $50 million machine that refused to speak. They never called her by her name. For 18 months she had been simply Wrench. But what none of them knew was that Lyra Kane had another name, one whispered in classified briefings, one earned in Syrian deserts under enemy fire. Shadow 7. The Apache sat like a wounded predator, its rotor blades motionless, its composite skin gleaming under the merciless Iraqi sun. It was one of 6 birds grounded by a phantom malfunction that appeared in no diagnostic report, yet rendered each aircraft inert. The port turbine refused to cycle past 50% power. Beyond that threshold, it simply quit. Brennan had arrived 3 months prior, fresh from maintenance schools, his tablet loaded with software that could measure a turbine blade's tolerance to a millionth of an inch. He was 32, brilliant in the way men who have never been tested often are. He trusted data. He trusted machines that read machines. What he did not trust was intuition, the knowledge that lived in a mechanic's hands rather than a computer's memory. Lyra had been at Talon 18 months, transferred from a posting she could not discuss. She worked night shifts when the base was quiet and the aircraft were hers alone. Day crews barely acknowledged her. Night crew, they muttered, as if darkness made their work less real. She had learned to be invisible. The uniform she wore bore no ribbons, no commendations, just her name tape, Kane, and staff sergeant chevrons. Nothing to indicate those hands had kept 6 Blackhawks operational for 14 days during a classified siege. Nothing to suggest she had rewired a catastrophically damaged tail rotor while mortars walked across the landing zone. The only hint was the leather tool roll she carried, worn soft from years of use. Inside were instruments that looked like artifacts from another age, slender probes bent at impossible angles, polished to brightness by uncounted hours in places manuals said were unreachable. That morning, when Brennan announced engineers from General Electric were being consulted via satellite, Lyra said nothing. When he proclaimed modern warfare requires modern diagnostics, not grease monkey guesswork, she simply nodded. When an airman whispered, maybe Wrench can ask the helicopter nicely, the laughter washed over her like rain off armor. She had heard worse in places where words were the least of the dangers. By afternoon, 6 grounded Apaches meant 6 missions canceled, 6 ground units without air support. Brennan's perfect diagnostic reports had become objects of superstition. Lyra had been awake 36 hours, moving between silent birds, her palm pressed against each fuselage, feeling for wrongness too subtle for sensors. When she returned to Hangar 7, she knelt beneath the port engine without announcement. "Flashlight," she said quietly. "Sergeant Kane, we have had military-grade fiber optic imaging inside that compartment. I assure you a flashlight will not reveal anything we have not documented 6 different ways." She took the light and played its beam across the engine's underbelly with deliberate precision. Then she placed her bare palm against the sun-scorched metal and closed her eyes. "What are you think you are doing, Sergeant?" "Listening, sir. This is a turboshaft engine, not a heartbeat. You cannot diagnose mechanical failure by feeling it." Her breathing slowed, became meditative. The hangar went quiet. Even the skeptics stopped their whispers. There was something unnerving about her stillness. "The machine is always speaking, sir. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it." When her hand touched the metal, the hangar dissolved. Syria, 2019. The smell of jet fuel mixed with rocket propellant and burning rubber. Her hands were buried in a Black Hawk's engine compartment, shrapnel damage that should have been fatal. The crew chief bleeding in the troop bay, the pilot screaming for medevac that wasn't coming. Her team leader's voice through the radio. "Shadow 7, if you cannot get that bird flying in 10 minutes, we are walking out." No spare parts, no time, just her hands and the tool roll she had modified for impossible situations. She had felt the fracture before seeing it, a hairline crack transmitting vibration like a scream through metal. She bypassed it with wire and tubing, a repair that should have been impossible. The Black Hawk lifted off with 12 lives inside. Her call sign whispered with reverence after that night. Shadow 7, the mechanic who could hear what machines whispered. Back in Iraq, Lyra opened her eyes. She knew what was wrong.
She withdrew her leather tool roll and untied it with unconscious grace. Inside were the tools, slender probes bent at impossible angles, polished by countless repairs. Brennan's face flushed. "You will not put those improvised instruments anywhere near my aircraft!" "They are mine, sir. I have used them to repair this airframe 3 times, while you attended video conferences with engineers who have never touched an Apache outside a classroom." Someone muttered. Someone stifled a laugh. "That is it!" Brennan's voice rose. "Sergeant Miller, contact Base Command. Inform them Sergeant Kane is refusing protocol and threatening to use improvised instruments on a weapons system. I want her removed." "There," Lyra said. The quiet certainty of that word cut through his tirade like a blade. She pointed at a spot buried deep in the engine housing. "The bleed air valve's pneumatic line, pressure fracture, hairline, opens only at 50% spool up under load. When cold, when static, when your diagnostics measure, it closes, invisible. You are looking for a problem that exists. I am looking for a problem that becomes." Brennan stared. "That is impossible. We scoped that section twice." "Your optics showed a moment frozen in time. They cannot show the problem in motion, in transformation, in the moment it becomes dangerous." "You cannot possibly know that." "I am certain, sir." The words hung in superheated air, not a boast, a statement of fact. "Sergeant Miller, call security forces. Have her escorted off this flight line." But Miller's hand slipped into his pocket. His phone emerged. A message flew across the base network. "Sir, CWO Brennan is about to have SGT Kane arrested. She found the problem. Please advise." The sound started as a low rumble. 3 black Tahoes appeared, government plates gleaming, not routine transport, rapid response precision. The vehicle screeched to a halt at the hangar entrance. 6 soldiers emerged in dress uniforms, majors, colonels, their ribbons glinting. Then the rear door opened. General Patricia Stone emerged, 3 silver stars on her shoulders, combat veteran, battlefield legend. She strode past assembled officers, past the silent Apache, past Brennan, whose salute she ignored completely. She stopped 3 feet from Lyra Kane and delivered the sharpest military salute the hangar had ever witnessed. "Shadow 7, General Stone said. "It is an honor." Brennan's tablet slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on concrete. "This is Staff Sergeant Lyra Kane, call sign Shadow 7, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. In 2019, Operation Sandstorm, she kept 6 Black Hawks operational for 14 days under fire. When her aircraft took critical damage, she repaired it with improvised tools that engineers called impossible and flew the extraction herself, saving 18 lives." The general's gaze fell on Brennan like a blade. "Chief, you have millions in equipment, software measuring tolerances the eye cannot see. Yet for 72 hours you found nothing. She found it in 10 minutes. Your diagnostics measure states. Her hands measure transitions. The moment stable becomes unstable. In combat, predicting failure is worth more than all your certifications combined." Lyra stepped forward, her voice gentle. "It is not his fault, ma'am. The machines are loud. The data is loud. He was trained to trust measurements. But machines whisper secrets in vibrations too subtle for sensors. Your diagnostics looked for a crack that exists. I listened for one that becomes." She held up her tool. "This fracture only opens under load. When cold, it closes, invisible. Your cameras cannot see a state that exists only in motion. But hands can feel it, because hands do not measure. They commune." 3 weeks later, Fort Rucker, Alabama. Staff Sergeant Lyra Kane stood before a classroom. The sign read, "Advanced Intuitive Diagnostics, Shadow Protocol." Mechanics from worldwide bases filled the room. "Your computers will tell you what is broken. I will teach you to hear what is breaking. There is a difference. That difference saves lives. In the front row, Chief Warrant Officer Brennan sat with notebook open, arrogance replaced by humility. On the wall hung a photograph of a woman in desert uniform beside a Blackhawk. Next to it, a shadow box with her tool roll and patch, Shadow 7, 1/60th SOAR. A brass plaque beneath read, "She heard what machines whispered. Shadow 7 saves." Lyra smiled at her students. "Let me tell you about the difference between seeing a problem and feeling it, between knowing a machine and communing with it." In that quiet classroom, far from war's chaos, the lessons began. The legend of Shadow 7, once classified, now passed to a new generation, not as data to download, but wisdom to earn. One hand, one repair, one impossible moment.